My name is Anita Nel. I'm from Innovis, University's innovation company. Okay, Tolstoy said happy families are all alike, but every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Now this also goes for companies. There are a happy company that will look the same, but the unhappy companies often have their very own personal reasons why they are very unhappy. So that brings us to what I'm going to talk about today. It's a wide variety of reasons why startups don't survive. There are many. You can think of, I would think, well, you will immediately be able to think up very accurate ones yourself, even if you don't have experience of that yet. And believe me, it's an interesting experience. But I'm going to look at a few, well, 8 very specific ones. And I'm going to share some fairy tales with you that do not really have happy endings. So before we can look at why a company fails, we must ask ourselves, why do we start companies? Now, if you watched Ali McBeal, then you would several times have noted that Richard Fish often quoted that he started the company for 4 main reasons. Money, money, fun, and money. And that's normally why people start companies. They want to make money. And if they admit, well, if they are honest about it, they also want to have fun in the process. Okay, so there are 20 reasons why startups fail. I can handle that, and you can take it home. And it's very accurate, but I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to choose a very few specific ones that are most often related to decisions made by the management of the company. The first reason is venture capital funding. Having worked in venture capital, I think I'm qualified to say that the VC can also be interpreted as vulture capital. That shows the attitude with which people often, well, your venture capital partner often comes to the table. So in the case of Innovis, we often see an inventor. You come up with a brilliant idea. See that nice picture? And then the VC steps in with a pot full of money, and suddenly the inventor has now been transformed into a CEO. That is when a massive paradigm shift takes place. Now, if you look at the story, the VC story, and how VC can kill a company, it can also, I'm going to go back to a fairy tale that your mother probably told you when you were small. It is the story about Cinderella. Now, Cinderella started out like most inventors with a pumpkin and a few mice. And then the VC comes into the picture, and suddenly the first customer. Everything is painted beautifully now because you have lots of money, and we'll go into that now. And the first customer arrives, and then a few things start going wrong. So in the end, at 12 o'clock, you seem to lose quite important stuff in your company, and you end up being the entrepreneur again with a pumpkin and a few mice. This is a very tragic story. It doesn't have the happy ending that you were often led to believe. So what happens in that process is that before money, you sit with a naive, often, inventor or entrepreneur. Beautiful stars in the eyes. And then after the VC investment, a very interesting paradigm shift takes place. The inventor is now a CEO. He has a board of directors. It's all important things here. There are auditors and admin that entered his life or hers. Meetings, agendas, minutes, action points, monthly reports, financial spreadsheets, management. It's quite a different story than when you imagine yourself tinkering away in front of your PC, writing apps, writing nice stuff, inventing things. It's a different ball game when the VC money comes into your life, because this whole package comes in. So the money means better stuff and more stuff and more things around you. It's so exciting for the young entrepreneur. Let's see this smug little face. There are fancy offices, there's funky furniture, MacBooks and iPads. Business class travel to wonderful places to visit wonderful people, higher salaries because you can afford it, more employees. There's the barista with the coffee machine that you have heard. That happened in our own town, the barista with the coffee machine. Yeah, don't mix it with someone else, but and then the whole hoo-ha around this importance of now being the CEO. However, as you've seen, this hardly ever have a happily ever after. So the reason is, as I've shown, you suddenly get entangled in so many things. There are so many demands that take away your focus. And I'll get back to that now. So my advice to you would be, don't raise your money too early. If you can bootstrap, or your friends and family can contribute, do what you can with as little as possible. If anyone funds you, take your first 280 rand, go to exclusive books and buy the Lean Startup and read it before you do anything else. So I think the important thing that is always so often missed is that you have to prove a business model and gain traction first without adding the complexities of an investing. Do this thing, suffer, go through the process, but prove that your business model works. There's a lot of, it is very important as well for yourself, because the further you are down the line with the process of building a business model and getting your first customers, the better your position is when you start negotiating with your investor. Because now you have a company that has less risk, and you are just much more in the pound seat when it comes to negotiating with your investor. And the other very interesting thing is the founders. You start a company with a craft. You have so many founders. And we hand out sweat equity to them. Just come and work for me at a reduced salary. I'll still pay your salary, but I'll give you lots of equity to design a website for me. Gosh, that website would cost you how much? Pay for the website, because that sweat equity that you hand out, if your company is Google and you hand it out 2% for a website, just imagine the value that you have given away. Value not at the early, cheap stage of the company. You are giving away the value when the company has real value. So just consider that. Sweat equity, it's easy to give away equity. I once sat on the board of a company that had 18 shareholders. I thought that was absolutely terrific, because every time you had a shareholders meeting, you had to keep 18 people happy, 18 people had to come. Every time someone wanted to sell their shares, their 2 shares, you had to go and find financial information, complete all sorts of forms. It was a nightmare. One of the university's own companies has a block of 18% shares. It's being owned by 64 people. From cleaners to management. But go figure out the nightmare. Yeah. So don't make that mistake. So sweat equity is never a good idea. At the end of the company, who's the boss? 3 of you, you're all equal. It was beautiful. You were all you were studying in the engineering faculty. It was so lovely. And now you start a company and we are equal. But someone has to be more equal than the others. Someone has to be the boss. So deal with it. Be brutal in the beginning. Deal with it. Someone is the boss, and that's it. He's the boss. So the question is also, is everyone working equally hard, or some in a marketing position and they get all the glamour whilst others work till 4 o'clock in the morning? Okay, then don't believe the story of best friends forever. I think there is one specific person in this room who will be able to tell. I'm not going to mention his name. But best friends aren't always best friends after this. And it is people, money comes between people, a lot of things come between people when the complexities of a company is added to a friendship. So keep that in mind. It's not always a good idea to start a company with a friend. It's not a bad idea, but be careful of what can happen to your friendship as well. And then people always overestimate their contributions. So when it comes to dividing the work tasks and getting rewards in terms of salary and equity, people will always overestimate their contributions and fight for more. So choose your co-founders well. There's not really a recipe, but be open-minded and walk into the situation with open eyes. Make sure there's a core team, not a crowd, that manages the company. And as I said, let someone actually take over the responsibility of managing it. Then it doesn't work out if everyone doesn't bring the same amount of passion into the company. And your market needs. And this is closely related to number 8, which is about your customer, which I'll get back to. When you have a solution for a very big problem, or what you perceive to be a big problem, it is often very easy to convince a venture capital company. I was there, they are not always the brightest people. That is why they invest sometimes in idealistic ideas, but it's nice. They get very excited and passionate about things. And you convince them to invest in your company. Now you start developing solution A, but you forget everything about what your customer actually needs. And while you are sitting in the incubator, isolated from reality, things are changing in the world out there. But you have a business plan, and we'll get to that rigidity later as well. You have a business plan, and you just follow that business plan. Let's develop the product according to what the VC invested in. And we forget about the competitors that start appearing on the horizon and changes in what your customer needs, that you don't adapt. So make very sure that you understand exactly who your market is and what they need. So too often have we seen that by the time a company is ready to launch their project or their product, it is already outdated and there's better solutions on the market. I think we invested in a venture capital company, a company called, what was it called? Philip, what was 4 young guys up in Joburg? That's such a beautiful name for the company. Well, they started off with a, what you see, a sound hound on the apps. You just MyBeat. They developed a technology that was actually had to be installed at the radio station, and when you switched on your car radio and wanted to know what song is playing, you just SMS'd a number and got all the info back. By the time they launched that, no one was interested in that anymore because things started to change. Today we have SoundHound. You just play the song automatically. You can even sing it if you can sing better than I do, and it will identify the song. So the technology was completely outdated by the time they wanted to launch it. Luckily, they discovered a very easy other way, which they are now making billions from. But yeah. So do your market research and try to understand exactly what your customer needs, not what you think the customer needs. Communicate on an ongoing basis with your potential customers. So if you have identified a specific company to be one of your potential customers, it's a very good idea to, while you develop the product, keep them informed of what you are developing. Ask them if your product in its current form will be able to solve their problem. And then often you speak about the same thing, but you don't connect with your client, because your client wants a hole in the wall, but you're talking about a drill. Because you want to sell a drill, you developed a drill. It's a perfect solution for the customer, but you don't talk about exactly the needs that he has. So if you want to sell a drill, talk about the hole in the wall. That is what the problem is. And be willing to adjust and change to keep up with your market. Losing agility is something that happens quite often, especially in IT companies. You have a very rigid and structured plan, and often the researchers or the inventors are too inflexible to really be able to change. And it's often an insecurity and a fear. They're afraid of entering the market, so they keep down this path that they have written maybe a year or two again when the VC invested in it. So it's very rigid, no changes, and we appoint more and more people to do what needs to be done. But we don't listen to our team members or the market and change a few things. So people often don't want to admit that the business plan or the business isn't working, and they just continue blindsided. Then in these days they call it reckless trading, because you keep on wasting your VC's money knowing that the route that you have taken is not going to work. This is very close to the never-ending story, where especially software is developed and more features are added every day, more things. We hear about a new need, we just add that. Someone at the coffee machine speaks about an interesting feature that could be added, and it's such a good plan, let's add it. And so you wait too long before you actually release your product. So there's always a perpetual development cycle. You cannot let go and just put it in the market and live with a few consequences of letting it go before it was absolutely perfect. Now, there's also a danger of doing it too early. We'll come to that. And it's as if you're going to panic. They panic a lot because they can't let go. Because it must be perfect. It is never a good idea. So, problem is also because people do what they love, not always what they are really good at. So it's better to start thinking about what's going to bring in the money. It's not always the love that brings in the money. That's a completely different business model. But anyway, so sometimes the best course of action is just to make a decision and say, this is where we draw the line. Let's put it now into the market, and you just do it. And that the answer to what is that point where you draw the line is what is now referred to as a minimum viable product. What is a minimum product that you can put into? What is that form of the product that you can release to the market that will solve the basic needs, and then from the feedback you get and the market adopters that start using it, you can then build onto it towards the next generation or next version. So what are the minimum requirements for release? Is it as it is? Is it useful? That's a question. If the answer is yes, then you can release it. You can always add the features later, because your customers will also tell you what features they need, not what you think they need. And then 4 things that you often do too early. That there's too much too soon, then the too early mistakes. I'm going to go into the 4 now, because all 4 of these just ruin your reputation. We see it very, very often. You start the company too early. It's a need to get an investment, so your investor is not going to invest in Anita Nel. They are going to invest in Anita Nel Pty Ltd. So you need to set up structure. And there's just so many problems. So the very first slide was what happens when the investor comes in. It's also the main reason why people start a company too early. And they just feel that without a company, they don't have credibility. So it's very difficult when all your friends are working for Investec and Eskom and all those companies, and you sit here at home and you don't even have a Pty Ltd. So people start these things, and it just becomes very, very difficult to manage all the activities that need to go around a company. And as I've mentioned, it's also about raising funding too early. And then what we have seen in one of our projects at the university, it's when you put out your press releases and social media announcements too early. So you create a hype for product or project or product that that causes great expectations. In the process, you give a lot of information about the product that you want to launch to your competition, and then you don't really have the ability to deliver. You say, in a month's time we will be launching this, and something happens and you don't launch. So people were expecting your project and it didn't happen. It just causes frustration, and it ruins your reputation and the trust that people had in you. And then launch too early with bug-ridden software or underdeveloped product. Now, I know of a company that is actually expert in this, but very few are. They launch their product too early, and then when the customer starts complaining, the customer has to pay for patches. It's a beautiful business model, but they don't get repeat customers. They get very frustrated customers, but it works for them. The problem is that your early adopters test the product and they leave. And when they leave, they also leave messages on Twitter and Facebook, and they speak to your other potential customers. So, not a good idea. Again, as I've said, don't lose your agility. Lean startups, not fat startups, not filled with too many people who won't get anything done. And again, the ever-eluding minimal viable product. These are all things that could prevent that. And then one of my favorites is getting it wrong with employees. It's again when you hire too many people. What happens when you hire too many people? You just burn your cash. They don't bring in money. They absorb money. And for the beautiful salaries that you pay, you often just get 8 hours of work per day, and then some sneak in. There's the visits to the toilet, there's the coffee machine, there's lunch hour, there's tea time. So often you get very few hours for the amount that you pay, and it slows you down. On the other hand, if you hire too few people, you as the entrepreneur is responsible for the admin. Your focus shift to trying to teach yourself how finance works. You start reading all these dummy books. So you must learn to delegate and have people to delegate to. There's no use in being perfectly skilled in delegation or delegating tasks if there's no one to delegate to. And then hiring the wrong people. I'm going to write a book about that. One or two examples, but these people just kill your company. Believe me, they kill your enthusiasm. They create an atmosphere in a company. It's just very bad. So easy to say that, but how do you solve it? I always hire people who are smarter than I. Look at these people. I work with people who are much smarter than I, because they make me look very good. So that is, if you're smart enough to understand that and you do it, it's wonderful, because you're also in an environment that stimulates you. And don't be afraid to acknowledge where your weaknesses are and hire people who are much stronger than you in that. I always say, if people often say they want to develop their weak areas, and then end up being people with very strong weak areas. Rather work on those areas, on your areas of strength. So you can be people with very strong strengths. So focus on that and choose the right people very carefully to surround you. Also consider the culture fit and flexibility when you hire these people. Don't be afraid to have interview after interview. Even if you have to interview the same person 7 times, make sure that it is the right person. And trust your gut feel. That's the one aspect. Your gut feel will tell you, is this the right person? Yes or no? That's such an easy test. Just learn to trust it. Outsource your HR and admin in the beginning of your company's life for as long as you can. There are always people better than you are who can make a good living out of doing your finances, handling that side of your business. It's an essential part of the business. If you're not going to do it well, if it's going to absorb all your time, expect failure. And then there's always the question of how much equity to employees. Now the golden rule is 15%. Some go very high, some go very low. And believe me, if you don't want to end up with 70 people owning 0.25% of shares in the end, go and speak to someone who can really give you good advice on these employee trusts and how to divide the equity. There's a wonderful virtual share options. If someone leaves a company, they should leave with a part of that company and become a shareholder. It's not adding any value to your company anymore, but sucking value and sucking your energy. So be very careful when it comes to employee trust. Get good advice. It's the best advice I can give you here. So it's also interesting when people come to the interview and the first question is, how much money am I going to get and how much of the company will I own? It's always, if those are the first questions, beware. It's just a practical experience, beware. Phone their referees on the CV and others. If you see the person worked for company A and you know someone in the company, but they have given up another reference, phone the reference, but also phone the other person. So ask around in industry, check out what that person writes on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We had a case where we employed a person, and Carol, you will remember. Carol then, on the internet, discovered that the person had a certain title on her CV, which she had at a previous job. But when we visited the internet and we found a newsletter on that company's website, it transpired the person, when they wrote a short article about her because she was now leaving to join the university, but she had a completely different title, much more junior than what was presented on the CVs. Interesting. Okay, so check out the background as far as you can, as good as you can. And then, getting it wrong with customers, my last point, before I give you a short case study. It's to me one of the most interesting things to see the Johnny Bravos. Poor nerd changed into Johnny Bravo, becomes overconfident. He doesn't listen to the customer because he always knows better than the customer. He never returns the calls or emails from the customer because it's not important. He's important. He argues with the customer. He's too busy to walk that extra mile. It's just arrogance all over. It is so wrong. I think I don't even need to tell you what will happen. But remember who's responsible for your company's income. It is, unfortunately, the customer. So treating with utmost respect. If they're not happy with you, they will possibly not tell you, they will just leave, but they will tell others. They will do it in spectacular ways on Twitter, on Facebook, wherever. They will tell it to their friends in the market who may, or who are possibly going to become your own customers. So let them feel special and important, and let them rather write good things about you on Twitter. Monitor how people are treating you, how people in your company are treating your customers. Phone, ask, are you happy with the service we give you? We want to improve the service. What can we do better? There's no harm in asking. In fact, it's extremely valuable and it creates a wonderful relationship because suddenly the customer sees that he is important to you. On the other hand, sometimes a company gives you very good service and that's what you expect. So it's exactly that, it's what you expect. And then something horrible goes wrong. The company really makes a spectacular mess up of the situation. Now, what is going to happen at that point, will determine whether you're going to be a far more loyal customer than you were before when they were giving you excellent service, or if you are going to leave. Because if that company comes back and they recover from that disastrous service I've given you in such a spectacularly beautiful way that makes you feel very special, your relationship with that company will be far better than it was before they gave you poor service. So go think about it. Go think about the situations in your life when you stopped, when you abandoned a business relationship with a company, or when you complained about service. They turned around, they walked that extra mile, they did everything in their power to recover. Those companies are the ones that impress you. You are far more loyal in the end than even before that, before the incident. Now, this is actually a very old case study, but it is one of my favorite ones ever. Now, I always ask, do you remember govworks.com? Now, if you guys won't, you're way too young, but neither do I remember them because they aren't around anymore. This company displayed a lot of several of the 8 big mistakes that I've just shown you. I'll show you what they did, but it was such an epic failure that they actually made a movie out of this. You should see. Now, this is what happened. These 2 founders were best friends from childhood. The one was a rainmaker. He could just make things happen. He was just a deal maker. He had everything. He's so charismatic. And the other one was a technical wizard. He could really come up with magic software and stuff. So then they had another guy with a very interesting name that joined them much later. Those 3 were then the founder, they formed the core team of this company. And they had a brilliant idea where they created a website where citizens could interact with local government. You could pay your fines there, you could pay your rates and taxes, all sorts of things. You could even apply for jobs. It was a one-stop shop for dealing with your municipality. No more queues, no nothing. You did everything online. And that was a good 14 years ago. So it was at that time, it was really a magic solution because people didn't want to queue. These days, we just do it. But those days, this was the very first good example of where the internet was actually, where it became useful for normal people. Yeah, as I say, you could submit building plans, renew licenses. It was a beautiful website. They had $60 million investments made into this company, and the board of directors were so impressed. So they launched it. And within weeks after the launch, the Tasman, he was the rainmaker, he was invited to the White House. There was such a hype around this company. He was invited to the White House for a summit meeting with the nation's most important people to discuss the future of government at the internet, in the internet age. So everything was going so well at this stage, and the investors were truly happy and bragging about the great investment they made. So then things started going wrong. GovWorks.com created a demo site for the people of Alameda County in California. The first thing that went wrong is when they misspelled Alameda. Don't create a website for the Stellenbosch municipality and not spell Stellenbosch. Okay, that can be forgiven. But at that point, they didn't really care. They were just on a roll to promote the company and to advertise it. So these were going to be test sites. It's not even implemented yet. It was just going to be test sites. But 2 of the municipalities, Stanford and Springfield in Massachusetts, Connecticut and Massachusetts, pulled out of this because they were becoming so fed up with these guys. I'll show you also what they did on the next one. But they backed out of the agreements to test at their municipal sites. because they felt offended that the company put out a press release way too early, bragging about the deals before they had actually signed the deals. They were already bragging about it. They were extremely confident. Then they put a very arrogant ad in the newspapers that it really made a joke of government people. And they thought by making a joke of government people, the public will just love them, because the public loves it when government looks bad. But they forgot that government was the client, not the public. Government was the client in the end. So, but they were so arrogant. They had their pitch. Well, their tagline was "Work with us or not, we don't care. We're coming to your city anyway." I mean, you can imagine. Imagine Zilla. She'll be the Ellen. If someone says, "Do you want to work with me or not, Zilla? I'm coming to your town." Okay, so they didn't come to San Francisco, but their competition did. That was the very first thing that really created a very bad incident in their history. The company also was so arrogant and so difficult to work with that their own advertising agency just fired themselves. They resigned to say, "We are not working with you." And then they couldn't decide who's the boss. I mean, there were two bosses, three actually, but the one wasn't that important. So the rainmaker just fired the technical guy. He fired him. He was a co-founder, but that was of zero importance. So towards the end of 2000, it was clear the company was bleeding money. They couldn't, the customers didn't, there were not enough contracts. It just didn't work out. So they reduced their staff from 250 to 60 employees. And yeah, they were doing $1 million a month in overheads. That was 14 years ago, quite a lot. So yeah, in 2001, they were sold to First Startup Corporation for nearly nothing. So I can see a company with everything going for them. The perfect solution, but a spectacular disaster. But this one is only for interest's sake, really. It has very little to do with the rest of this. But I want to give you at least good news, end with that. Look at Pinterest, a company that should not survive. I mean, against all odds. They founded this company in 2008. 18 months later, they got a very important venture capital company on board as lead investor. And they were at that point, 18 months into their life, they were already valued at $40 million. October 2011, Series B round is a second round of investment, and valuation jumped up to $200 million. And they had 5 million unique visitors. And then 2 years ago, a Japanese company led another $100 million investment. The company is now, was 2 years ago already valued at $1.5 billion, and they have no revenue. They have so little revenue. So this is one of those spectacular against all odds. So on that note, I want to tell you, do not lose your optimism. I may come across bringing you very bad news here, but not every startup is doomed to fail. So there are numerous successful companies, and I'm sure we're all going to count you among those in a few years' time. So enjoy the journey. Any questions?
Sorry, about the minimum viable product.
Yeah?
As a startup, you're probably too close to the product to really realize when it's ready to get out there. Would it be a good idea getting someone from outside?
Yes,
Give
always.
you an opinion?
Someone you trust, someone who has experience preferably in the market. Someone who is interested in really making you succeed. So try and find a mentor as soon as possible. There is, it's such an invaluable opportunity if you can hook up with a mentor, because that person is probably not going to charge you any money, but will add far more value than you can even imagine. So, and trust their opinion, don't argue. So, don't always do what they say, but yeah, be careful.
I have a question regarding the 15% employee share option pool. At what status is it? At Series A or at founding?
Now, your founder shares will always be, your founder shares are completely different from that. That's your normal, your employee shares. Once your company is now, there's possibly been an investment or you have a turnover, so you have a company. It's not exactly a startup anymore, but when you start employing people, because they're not founders, but they want equity, it is a way to manage that. But it's not actual equity that you give them in hand. It's very virtual. It should be.
So I mean, is it at the Series A level, would you say that roughly about Series A or at angel investment, when would you?
No, not at typically not angel. I would say after Series A.
After
so from Series B onwards, when your company is expanding.
So at that dilution, then you put up 15%.
Yes, and you don't start with the very first employee that you wait a bit, and then at some point in the company's life you announce that, and then there's already a pool of employees for shares. So. No more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and yeah, good luck.